congressman for Minnesota's 1st District for 12 years, and now sharing his thoughts with us on the Al Travis Show. It's Congressman Gil Gutknecht.
Could not be happier to have my friend on, Congressman Gil Gutknecht, especially this week when the big, beautiful bill is supposed to get done here by Friday. Congressman, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you.
You have to bust this down for us, because it doesn't matter if you're listening to CNN, you're listening to Fox, you listen to the right and the left. None of it adds up. This is going to be the biggest tax increase, our savings for billionaires across the country. This is for the rich people. Donald Trump calls it the biggest tax cut in the history of America. If Al says it, isn't it we're just keeping the tax rate exactly where it's at? It's not going to let it expire, the tax cut, the first Trump tax cuts. This just keeps them from expiring. No one's going to see a difference in their taxes one way or the other this week from next, are they?
No.
Because that's how I stand it.
No, well, if it passes, and it will pass.
Okay.
And that's where I think from the very beginning, the president has oversold this. Okay. And I think, it has inadvertently built up the pressure on this whole bill. I mean, everybody talks about the cost of the bill, that, oh my gosh, it's going to deprive the federal government of $3 trillion worth of revenue over the next 10 years. Technically, that's probably true. But the bottom line is, if you don't pass this bill, in all likelihood, revenues to the federal government are going to decline. Because, I mean, the thing that they always forget to really try to explain, and this is what I did when I was on the budget committee. When you think about Americans, or you think about people in general, but particularly Americans, there are only a few things you can do with your money. Mm-hmm. You can spend it, you can invest or save it, or you can pay taxes. Now, if you want the economy to actually grow and create more jobs, more opportunity, more income for people, what's the least profitable thing that you can do with your money? Give it to the federal government. Yeah. In fact, I used to use this in speeches, and I have to admit that I stole the idea, but I would ask people to close their eyes. In fact, if you're not driving your car and you're listening to this program, do this at home. Close your eyes and imagine that you come home today and there's a letter there from an attorney a long ways away, and you open the letter and you realize you have been named an heir to a huge estate that you didn't even know existed. There's some rich uncle somewhere that left you a bunch of money. Okay, keep your eyes closed. And you think about this, and all of a sudden it's a windfall. You didn't expect this money. So you decide you'd like to take a significant portion of that money and do something to help your fellow human beings. All right, think about that now.
Yeah.
All right, how many of you in the listening audience, the first thing you thought of was, I know, I'll give it to the federal government.
They know what to do with it. Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure that's a very small group of people.
Even liberals laugh, because everyone knows that if you really want to help your fellow human beings, you might give it to the Red Cross, you might give it to the Salvation Army, you might give it to your church, you might give it to some other charity. But they all understand something very fundamental, that if you really want to help your fellow man, the last thing you could do is give it to the federal government, because you know that a lot of it is going to be wasted or consumed by the bureaucracy. I mean, that's just a fact. What Elon Musk and the people of Doge proved is that there is an enormous amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal budget, okay? So the real issue is, what can we do to allow Americans to keep more of their own money? Because they will invest it and save it and spend it smarter than the federal government will do on their behalf. So it's not an argument about how much is going to be spent on children, or how much is going to be spent on education, or even how much is going to be spent on health care. It's really a debate about who gets to do the spending.
Okay, let's bust this thing down a bit. You've had $3 trillion over 10 years. As I understand it, most of that in the last 7 years of the bill. We don't know that Donald Trump or even Republicans will be in charge at that time. This can change everything. Here's what I don't like about it. I'm just trying to be Mr. Conservative guy. Even the Doge, and we're talking Sesame Street productions in Iran and all the other crap that the Doge guy founded, we can all say, what in God's green earth are we doing? shouldn't those have absolutely been cut out of this? Shouldn't we see that literally starting on the time, once they sign this budget, we see that all of a sudden, not 10 years down the road, that we'll get to some money. We're $3 trillion over budget every year now. I'm a little upset that this isn't better than it was.
Well, yeah, right. But you have to understand the limits of what you can do in a reconciliation bill. Okay, some of those things, were not really eligible to be. In fact, you saw the parliamentarian in the Senate threw out some of the junk in the trunk that they'd thrown in there. And so all of those issues, it seems to me, and now just from a purely political standpoint, ought to be taken up in separate bills.
This is what I was going to say. Make every one of them a single bill. Every Republican, because that's what we're talking about, can stand on it or not. You're going to let USAID stand, take your vote, and we'll talk about it in 2 years when the election comes up. I think every one of them should be a vote, because everyone's going to be able to say, well, I had to vote for it to bring this home. It's just another pork bill. When did we get this? When did we get to 12 separate bills like we should? I'm just not happy, sir. Should I be happy? It's going to happen by the 4th.
Well,
convince me.
You might as well be happy. I mean, there's no upside in being unhappy. So I figured, I'm a happy
Dr.
warrior.
Phil moment.
At the end of the day, this is going to pass.
Okay.
And I do think, as you look down the road, those other issues. And frankly, I think the DOJ may have only scratched the surface. I think that we need to look very deep into all the bureaucracies and find all the duplication and so forth. We did some of that back in the 90s when we actually balanced the federal budget and paid off $500 billion worth of publicly held debt. And so it can be done again. I do wish that the leadership in both the House and the Senate had made it very clear that, oh no, we have just begun to scratch the surface of the waste and mismanagement inside the federal government. And, the Democrats, and the truth of the matter is, I think that the president did a miserable job at the beginning overselling what this bill is, okay? And so let's put one in that category.
Sure.
But at the same time, the Democrats and the media and their friends in the media have really overstated, the nastiness of this bill. When you talk about the majority of the tax cuts are going to go to wealthy people, well, you got to step back and say, the majority of taxes are paid by the wealthy people. 80% of the taxes are paid by 20% of the individuals. All right.
Yeah.
So any tax cut is probably going to benefit people who pay most of the taxes.
You can't give it back if you're not putting in. Yeah.
Right. Almost 50% of American taxpayers pay almost no income tax.
Yeah.
Now they say, well, yeah, but they pay payroll tax. Well, that payroll tax, the FICA tax, is for Social Security and Medicare, and so that's not really part of the income tax structure. Number one, so it's wealthy people who pay the tax. If you have a tax cut, or if you just keep taxes the way they are, the wealthy will benefit slightly more than the average Joe.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, they're the people who spend the money, who invest the money, who create jobs. And frankly, as part of the tariff strategy, those are the people who are making decisions to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. And as I've said before, we cannot be a country that just sells insurance to each other. I mean, we have to have a manufacturing base. And so on so many fronts, Trump is right. I mean, you may not like the way he conducts himself. You may have a prickly personality. I mean, all those things are probably true. But on policy after policy, whether we're talking about the tariffs, we're talking about taxes, we're talking about foreign policy, whether we're talking about enforcing the immigration laws, on all of those things, he's right. And I think most Americans know that.
Let's use that as our go-to to the break, because that's what I want to talk to you about. I don't know if in whatever we're at, 150, 160 days, there's ever been a president on the things he said he would do, right, wrong, if you like it, he's won on all of them. Right down to the Supreme Court coming up and said, you got to stop this, you little lawyers down here, you little judges down here, to helping Israel, to the tariffs. Everything he said he was going to do, he's pulled off. The border, I think last week we actually had 0 illegal border crossings in the country. Let's talk about his successes on the other side and why maybe he's not getting enough credit. More after this with Congressman Gil Gutknecht.
Think about it. Now that school's out for the summer, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
Dust from gravel roads and driveways does more than make your car dirty inside and out. It gets down into your lungs, and it's bad for your health. Now there's an environmentally friendly solution for your dust problems. It's called Dust Lock. Dust Lock can control all your summer dust problems with just one application. Protect your vehicle and your lungs. Learn more at dustlock.com.
It's nice to know a guy that knows a guy. Al Travis.
We know him and love him. He's Congressman Gil Gutknecht. Congressman, so if you were to look at the things Donald Trump said he would do, I'm going to close the border. The other side said, no way, no how. You got to have a big bill to close this border down. And literally we had 0 crossings last week. 0. That's about as close as you can get. He comes out and says, I'm going to do this tariff thing. No more are we going to pay tariffs when everybody throws tariffs at us. I watched CNN. This was the end of the Dow. It was over. The whole stock market is going. It's now after whatever a month, it's higher. The S&P is higher than it's ever been. There isn't a thing going with Israel to help with getting rid of Iran's nuclear. Right? He joins with a one-day strike with Americans with missiles, and it looks like they decimated Iran's nuclear capabilities. He should get a Nobel Peace Prize. This guy's had an unbelievable 180 days. And if you watch CNN, his polls are down. They're not happy with this big, beautiful bill. How can that even be possible? Look what this guy promised he'd do and what he's doing.
Well, it can be possible because the media doesn't tell the truth. I mean, the bottom line is if the media just shared, they don't report any of this as success, okay? But the average American sees it. They see what he's accomplished. And, I used to think that this Trump derangement syndrome was kind of a myth, okay? But
Not
the
anymore.
truth of the matter is, it's true. I mean, it is
Yeah.
true. There is a large group of Americans, and I would say a healthy majority of people in the national media who have this syndrome, and they can't even admit that on issue after issue, he not only has kept his promises, but they're enormously successful.
Yeah.
Since he started putting tariffs on other countries that looked more like the tariffs that they were charging us, the Treasury has raised over $120 billion, okay, from those
Yeah.
tariffs. Think about that. What a difference that makes in terms of the budget. What he's done, if Ukraine and Russia would listen to him, we would have peace in that region. And frankly, I think the rest of the world would be delighted. But
Yeah.
right now, neither Putin nor the leader of Ukraine, whose name now escapes me,
Yeah.
but we would have real peace
Zelensky.
there. I think we're looking at ultimately. I think that we're going to see regime change inside Iran.
Yeah.
That
people
I really
themselves,
believe
yeah.
that. And if you look at whether we're talking about immigration, whether we're talking about the economy, whether we're talking about the tariffs, whether we're talking about illegal immigration and enforcing, you said it right. The Democrats said for years, well, we can't really enforce the law unless we pass new laws.
Yeah.
I mean, if the media had done its job and just said, that's nonsense. That is
Makes no
political
sense.
doublespeak. Why can't you enforce the laws
law.
that are clearly written, many of which have been on the books since 1882? I mean, it's not like this is something new. All of this, none of this would be happening if the media told the truth. And they wonder why a growing majority of Americans don't trust them. And they don't trust them because of the doublespeak and the bald-faced lies. You know what a bald-faced lie is? The lie is so obvious that it can't even be hid by a whisker. It can't hide behind a whisker. And so much of what they do, whether we're talking about the big, beautiful bill, which, they could have said from the beginning, basically extends the current tax rates. And if we don't do that, the economy will likely slow down and revenues to the federal government will actually decline. Now, and at the same time, if we don't pass this bill, people who are in this country illegally will continue to get Medicaid benefits, which were originally designed for poor people in the United States, citizens of the United States. In no other country, they could just simply say, in no other country in the world can you enter the country illegally and expect that country to pick up all of your rent, your food, your health care bills, and by the way, teach your kids in a bilingual education environment. No other country in the world will do that.
I want to throw one more thing at it with 2 minutes. I got one more thing. I just want to know what you think about it because you're a congressman. One of the things Donald Trump's people are trying to do is make sure when we do the census in 2030, they only count citizens. This is a big deal because California, as an example, counted everyone who was in California, including illegals. You get a congressman for every 176,000, whatever it is, people in your state. That will cost California 5 to 10 legislative seats. It will give other states. Where are you on this? Should we be counting illegal immigrants as people in your state to give you representation?
This is a classic example of Trump 2.0. During his first administration, this was one of the huge mistakes that he made. And he appointed the director of the census. And the director of the census by himself said, well, I think we have to count everyone in the country, whether they're in the country legally or not. And Trump went along with it. And this time, as the old Germans say, so soon old and so late smart. I think Trump and his entire team is a lot smarter. And absolutely, we should only count citizens. Only those people who are eligible to be in the United States legally ought to be counted as citizens of the United States.
But that'll change the whole map. I mean, the Democrats go to the end of the nines on this because this will change the electoral map big time. Bigly, as the president.
And there again, I think if the media told the truth, that they would explain that this is purely about politics. It's about pure power politics because they want to count these people because at the end of the day, if they don't count those people, the Democrats are going to lose about 20 seats in the Congress.
Yeah, it's huge. Sir, you know I love having you on the program, but thank you for taking the time out of your day, and I hope you're going golfing today. It looks like a beautiful day. I hope you hit them well. Gotta fly. Appreciate you. Congressman Gil Gutknecht on the Al Travis Show.
Achieving your financial goals